Today, we're diving into a really tragic and incredibly complicated incident out of Minneapolis. It's a story that involves a fatal shooting, a federal agency, and a city's sanctuary status. And they all collided in a single moment that has opened up some huge questions for the entire country.
I know, that sounds like a huge leap, right? But that question, it really gets to the very core of what we're going to unpack today. To even begin to understand how an ICU nurse could be killed by federal agents on a city street, we first have to untangle this complex legal web that brought them all to that spot in the first place.
All right, so before we can get to the incident itself, we've got to lay some groundwork. We need to understand the rules of engagement here. What does it actually mean when a federal agency like ICE is operating in a city that calls itself a sanctuary? This really gets to the heart of the whole legal tug-of-war. See, on one side, you have the federal government, and for them, immigration is exclusively their job. That means ICE can operate anywhere in the entire country. But then, on the other side, you've got the city, which has a policy that basically tells its own police, hey, you are not going to help ICE. So what's the bottom line here? A sanctuary policy is really just a statement of non-cooperation. It is not a keep out sign. It legally cannot stop federal agents from doing their job within city limits. And this right here, this is the constitutional reason why. You can think of the Supremacy Clause as the ultimate trump card in the legal deck. It basically says that when federal and local laws clash, federal law wins, period. It's the bedrock legal principle that stops a city from just, banning a federal agency. So let's just bust a few myths right now, because it's really important to get this straight. The term sanctuary city does not create some kind of magic shield. It doesn't ban federal agents. It doesn't give anyone immunity from immigration law. All it means, the only thing it means, is that the local cops are told not to voluntarily help ICE. And it's also worth remembering, ICE isn't just dropping in for a visit. They have a permanent field office right there in nearby St. Paul. They are part of the landscape. Okay, and just when you think you've got it figured out, there's another layer. Not all ICE agents are doing the same thing. The agency actually has two major branches with very different jobs, and both of them are active in this part of the country. So on one hand, you have ERO. That stands for Enforcement and Removal Operations. This is the branch you probably think of first. They handle immigration enforcement, finding people with deportation orders, that sort of thing. But then you have HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. Think of these agents as the federal detectives of ICE. They're tackling huge criminal enterprises like drug and human trafficking, transnational gangs, and major cybercrime. It's so key to understand this split because it means you've got different types of federal agents with totally different training operating in the very same space. So, with all that legal and operational context in our back pocket, let's turn to the specific event that ignited this firestorm. Because on one Saturday in Minneapolis, all of these overlapping jurisdictions and different missions, they collided, and the outcome was fatal. At the very center of this story is Alex Pretti. He was a 37-year-old man whose job, his entire profession, was to save lives as an ICU nurse. His own life was cut short during this encounter with ICE agents. Now, analysis of video from the scene pieces together this just devastating chain of events. It all seems to start when Pretti steps in after seeing an agent shove a woman to the ground. And from there, things escalate with terrifying speed. He's pepper sprayed, he's thrown to the ground, he's being struck. Then comes the shout that changes everything. He has a weapon. Seconds later, a volley of shots. He's hit at least 10 times. And then the audio captures this absolute critical moment after the shooting. One agent asks, "Where is the weapon?" And another agent replies, "I have the weapon." So, as you can probably guess, that sequence of events has led to two completely, totally different stories of what happened. You've got the one from the federal government, and then you have the one pieced together by media organizations who have poured over the footage. The official account from ICE and the Department of Homeland Security is incredibly stark. They paint a picture of Alex Pretti as a domestic terrorist, someone who was armed, who was violently resisting, and who was determined to cause, in their words, maximum damage. This is their full justification for using lethal force. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the story just completely splits in two. Independent analyses from major news outlets like CNN and the New York Times came to a stunningly different conclusion. They say the video evidence never actually shows Pretti holding a weapon. In fact, they report that an agent takes the pistol and physically walks away with it before the fatal shots are fired. I mean, that is a night and day difference from the official narrative. And then you've got this piece of information, which adds a whole other layer of complexity.
The Minneapolis police chief himself confirmed that Alex Pretti had a license to carry. So while a weapon was at the scene, he was legally permitted to have it on him. And it's not just journalists questioning the official story. Charles Ramsey, he's a very respected former police chief, now a law enforcement expert for CNN. He reviewed the footage and gave this absolutely damning assessment. He said, "From what I can see now, this does not look like a righteous shooting." Unsurprisingly, the shooting, and especially these conflicting accounts, ignited a political firestorm that exposed some really deep divisions, not just in Minneapolis, but all across the country. Minnesota's own governor, Tim Walz, really captured the frustration and anger that so many people in the state were feeling, just lamenting how often these kinds of violent encounters seem to happen. The city's leadership took an even harder line. The mayor of Minneapolis came out and made a direct demand. He said ICE needed to leave his city. Well, that local and state-level outrage was met with an immediate and powerful pushback on the national stage. Former President Donald Trump fired back, accusing the governor and the mayor of inciting riots with what he called pompous, dangerous, and arrogant rhetoric. It just goes to show how deeply polarized the reaction to this incident became. And so that's where we're left. We're stuck in this massive collision between federal authority and local values, with two completely different realities of what happened on that street. And it forces us all to ask this really unavoidable question. When these powerful forces clash, who is it that ultimately bears the cost?